Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin the webinar.
Hi, are we starting?
We're ready. Let's go, Marcy.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome, welcome. We are so excited about our sustainable fashion panel discussion today, and we are fortunate to have with us 5 distinguished panelists who are at the forefront of integrating sustainability with fashion. So let's introduce them, and then we'll dive into our discussion, which will explore the significance of sustainability in the fashion industry and examine actionable strategies and innovations that are shaping the future of what we wear. So with that, in no particular order, we are going to start with Alicia Reiner, an actress and activist known for her SAG award-winning role as Natalie Figueroa on Orange is the New Black and in the Emmy award-winning Ms. Marvel. A passionate advocate for sustainability, Alicia uses her platform to promote environmental awareness and has been a driving force behind several eco-fashion and eco-beauty initiatives. Alicia, it's wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Next up, we have Marcy Zaroff, another Marcy, a pioneer in the eco-fashion movement who actually coined the term eco-fashion over 3 decades ago. She is the founder and CEO of Eco Fashion Corp, a series of brands that represent a sustainable lifestyle. Marcy, thank you for being here as well.
Thanks for having me.
And
Marcy.
We also welcome Nina Farron, who is the founder of Fashion Kind, which is a platform that revolutionizes how we think about luxury and sustainability. With a background in finance and a deep commitment to impact investing, Nina bridges the gap between style and sustainability. She empowers consumers to make choices that are both chic and ethical. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And next up is Sylvia Camplone, who is a seasoned product management manager at Polo Ralph Lauren. With over 15 years of experience in fashion product management, Sylvia brings a depth of knowledge in integrating sustainable practices within major fashion brands. Her expertise is crucial in driving the industry towards more responsible product and design. Sylvia, thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And finally, we have Dori Morales, the publisher of Green Living magazine, which is a key platform for promoting sustainable living. Dori has been instrumental in educating and inspiring individuals to lead more sustainable lives through her work with the magazine. Welcome, Dori.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Super excited to be here.
So excited that all of you ladies are here. Okay, so as we dive into our discussion today, let's explore the complex landscape of sustainable fashion, which is, needless to say, a super complex topic. So we'll be focusing on both the psychological aspects and the shared responsibilities within the industry. So let's begin with a question about consumer behavior. And Alicia, I'm going to direct this one at you. Considering your extensive advocacy, could you discuss the psychological mechanisms behind overconsumption in fashion and how understanding what these are can help us to promote more sustainable behaviors?
Sure. Thank you, Marcy. I just want to start by saying I love that you started by very specifically pointing out the psychological factor of it, because I do believe that's a big piece of what I'm learning and I'm curious about, is that whole thing about overconsumption. I think we've been taught certain things, and I almost want to say not psychological, because that sort of puts the onus on the person as much as what we've been taught by patriarchy, by capitalism, what we've been taught, how we've been socialized, particularly as women, that we have to buy things to feel like we're enough. And that to me is such the big secret pain point that we don't want to talk about when we talk about sustainability. Like, we are taught if we buy the right thing, we will get the right guy, we will get the right job. If we do the right thing beauty wise, whatever it is, it's that like perfectionistic fantasy, right? And I love that you started this panel talking about what that does to our brains and how it then makes us want to consume. Because that really is a big, big, big piece of this that I'm continually sort of trying to unbrainwash myself from. And so for me, in this moment, I'm really curious about how I change my brain, how I change my own psychology about consumption. One of the things I like to think about is, let's pretend there's no such thing as recycling, because some people would actually argue that there isn't. So then it becomes, how are we reducing and how are we reusing? When we talk about reducing, for me, that means, do I really need this thing? And why asking myself that psychological question, do I need this thing? Why do I think I need this thing? You know, how many white shirts do I need? How many whatever, and what do I think I'm gonna get from this object? Now, certain things we do need. You know, as a mother of a 15-year-old, like, she keeps on sizing out of her clothes, or she has continued to. I think we're now at the place where that's stopped, which is really exciting because she's my size. So she takes everything from my closet, which I personally love as a reductionist. And, you know, for me, I'm always looking at, like, this is my grandma's shirt that's over 50 years old. And a big piece to me of sustainable fashion is, how do you care for your things? Yes, things that are not fast fashion, that are older and that are more well made, are a lot easier to care for in a way. So there's so many layers to it, but I think one of the biggest things that I'm really curious about is really starting by asking yourself the question, do I need this thing? And why do I think I need this thing? And what do I think it will make me feel? And is there another way to feel that thing other than buying something?
Thank you. I think that, yeah, you pointed out something so important. It's so crucial to understand these underlying psychological factors, because I think until you point something like that out, many of us don't even think, well, why, how did that behavior get passed down to me, indoctrinated?
Capitalism and patriarchy, my friends.
Well, so I think just when breaking it down and making it simple and saying, ask yourself, why do I need this? It's just such a simple thing that anyone can do. And I think the answers would probably surprise us all. We asked ourselves about that about everything in our closets, for example. Marcy, with Marcy Z, Eco Fashion Corp leading the way in sustainable fashion. How can brands and consumers collaborate more effectively to drive sustainability? You know, and what strategies have you found the most effective in fostering this collaboration through what you do at Eco Fashion Corp?
Yeah. So first of all, just building on top of what Alicia said, I mean, I think one of the sort of going deeper in this movement has been about going from, it's just about looking good fashion, right, to feeling good. And I don't just mean physically, but feeling good and doing good in the world, right? And that is when I started my career, and would talk about eco fashion. People thought I was crazy. These are two dichotomous worlds, and people who are into fashion don't care about, human and environmental wellness. And people who are into more humanitarian, social justice and environmental issues are less inclined to be into fashion. And for me, I've spent so many years kind of bridging those worlds. So one thing I've learned in terms of how to really drive this movement forward is to meet individuals, whether it's consumers or it's brands and retailers, where they are, right? Don't impose on them. Like I have obviously, a lot of information in my head for decades of being in the trenches at a very deep level. But, it's about leading with design, right? And I have a book out called Eco Renaissance, Co-Creating a Stylish, Sexy, and Sustainable World. Alicia's actually featured in the book. And, it really is about appealing to people at a very visceral level, right? Through an aesthetic experience. My mentor was the founder of Aveda. And, beauty was his vehicle, fashion is mine. But, it's about give people what they want, what they love, what they seek, what resonates for them in fashion. That means style, quality, fit, color, comfort, hand. That's the yes. And so how do I speak about it? It's a yes and approach. Yes is what you lead with. And oh, by the way, it's also about fair trade and ethical manufacturing. It's about regenerative and circular fibers, low impact dyes, women's empowerment. All that yummy stuff is the value add. So the way to drive the movement forward it's not about sacrifice and deprivation. You're not giving anything up, you're getting more. And so it's all about the packaging and to teach people and activate them, engage them around value and values, right? That, we can vote with our dollars. We can be a part of something that goes from seed to self so that everything we put in, on, and around ourselves is an extension of who we are. Everything is made of energy, right? And so it really is about when I'm meeting with, consumers, like I go on HSN, I go on QVC, and it's about storytelling and having fun and still, giving those important reasons as to the why, but also shifting that equation to be about the why not, right? Because if you lead with everything they want and there's more, now you're not giving up anything, you're getting more. And so I've always said 1 + 1 = 11. I got married on 11/11/11, very auspicious number in my life, because we're stronger together than apart, exponentially. So everyone needs to be at the table. It's all hands on deck, with climate events today. We can be a part of making a difference in a way that it's no longer about less harm. It's about more good, right? It's about connecting into our partnerships. And in our case, at Eco Fashion, a few examples would be, with Yes And, we just partnered with a company called Daily Look, owned by Adore Me. And this Monday, we're going to be launching a collaboration together to start introducing their consumers and they're the biggest subscription box, I think, in America, to Yes And Eco Fashion. And Hilary Swank just joined us as a partner in the business, and she's going to be featured and the ambassador of the collaboration and helping to build the business alongside Nigel Barker, who is our chief marketing director and also or officer, and a very engaged partner in the business as well. And so, it's connecting agriculture to popular culture and, giving people everything they want and so much more.
Thank you. And we are going to definitely touch more on that agriculture plus pop culture later on in our panel. But thank you. And I love that you are just leading with the positive. And if you're a consumer, of course you want that yes, right? You want the things that you want. And I think it's great when a brand can kind of bring that value and kind of show you other things you can have, because who doesn't love an extra bonus and a value add for sure. Which leads us to my next question, which is for Nina. As the founder and CEO of Fashion Kind, which is, by the way, for those of you who don't know, an amazing luxury and sustainable retail platform where I've discovered so many brands myself. Nina has introduced me to so many, since our first meeting years ago. You've set a really high standard in luxury fashion by integrating sustainability with high design. And given the challenges that are just inherent in this sector, what strategies do you believe are the most effective for encouraging luxury brands to embrace sustainable practices more robustly?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, and also just piggybacking off the last two questions, I think Alicia and Marcy really hit the nail on the head with the idea of first, leading with a positive and make it so that there's not an existence or necessity of sacrifice. My background is in impact investing, and for so long, impact investing, aligning your values with your investments, necessitated a sacrifice of returns from a portfolio return perspective. And of course, then no one wanted to do impact investing if it had that sacrifice. For some time, many, many decades ago now, sustainability and fashion, was also perceived to have that sacrifice. And I think what has been really important about the evolution of the impact investing and now impact investing space, fashion space is just as Marcy said, that there's no sacrifice. You would see these pieces on the street, in a magazine, on social media, and want them regardless of the story. And often many people don't purchase because of the story. Just as Marcy said, it's the cherry on top. It's the extra amazing piece of it, but you're not coming back just because of story. And I think that, when we think about why we targeted luxury, we get a lot of questions about that, a lot of feedback about that. It's a hundreds of billions of dollars industry. It is massive. And if we can influence change in the consumers who have a choice when making purchases and help achieve economies of scale with some of these sustainable processes, materials, craftsmanship that we're preserving, female heads of households across the world that we work with, we can ultimately help shape a better industry. So that's actually part of the reason why we targeted luxury. Also because luxury consumers with millennials and Gen Z now are really unlike any prior luxury consumers in the past. And so that was really exciting to me. I saw that millennials were bringing a change in how they wanted to invest when I was in impact investing. And for the first time, they were putting pressure on for their investments to reflect their values. That didn't stop at their investments. That continued to how they consume and what they consume. And so it was this new definition, actually, of luxury that the millennial generation brought about, which was no longer tied to brand names or logos, and instead tied to values and craftsmanship and something made in a beautiful way. And that is what really excited me as well, to connect these consumers with these designers and artists and communities I had been discovering since 2008 when I started in impact fashion, who a lot of them struggled to break outside of their local communities, local markets. So to bring them to a global stage to meet these consumers who not only want to align their purchases with their values, but also want to stand out and love their unique style, was what caused me to start Fashion Kind. And I think reinventing the supply chain that currently exists in a way where we're not just producing everything in one place or in one way, and instead preserving, kind of going back to what the ground and foundation was for luxury, which is focused on craftsmanship and artisans and things made by hand that are preserving traditional techniques in a beautiful way so that it's never mass produced, so that it is, these skills, these artisan techniques and craftsmanships are generational. But if you don't present a way for artisans to earn an income practicing them, you'll lose an entire generation, and then you'll lose it entirely. So that's really what we think about. We now have been contacted by many of the major conglomerates or luxury fashion houses who are just so interested in what we've essentially done is build a new supply chain as well, with these designers and artists and communities around the world in areas that luxury houses may not have been creating before. And so, this idea of what we're all doing, who's on this panel, by the way, I love that it's all women. What we're all doing is reinventing the way things have always been done. Just because they've been done this way doesn't mean that's the way they have to be done or even should be done. And let's challenge things to be done better and in a way that doesn't have any sacrifice at all across the board.
Absolutely. It's so important to keep pushing, and Fashion Kind has really set such a benchmark for that. And
Thank you.
It's pretty great to think about all of the luxury brands that have come to the forefront. I mean, nothing nothing gets funding anymore without a strong mission impact statement. And you really see those values highlighted on every brand's website now. And that didn't used to be the case. You would just go to a luxury brand because of the name, like who even knew what values were, like why would there be a page dedicated to that? And now I think it's really become the norm, and that's thanks to Fashion Kind and other companies that are doing the same, to constantly push the envelope for sustainability. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I think, this alludes to another question you asked as well. In order for us to have a more sustainable future for fashion, it requires something that has been very taboo in fashion, which is knowledge sharing. It used to be that no one would share who their suppliers were, where they were creating pieces. That was something that was kept very close to the chest. And so what this opens up and what this necessitates is knowledge sharing, is someone like Marcy to go to these bigger brands and show how it can be done differently. And because often these bigger brands need to interact with the smaller brands that are more nimble, that can be making changes quicker, who are on the ground. And that is the key to them influencing change too on the larger scale. Is this, I'm sure you found this, Sylvia, at Ralph Lauren, it is that knowledge share, it's that collaboration, which is something that didn't really used to exist, or people didn't used to be open to in the fashion industry for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I think, leaders can definitely. Oh, and Marcy.
No, I was just going to say cooperation, like bam.
Yes, exactly. Big companies have, I think, a huge responsibility to share their knowledge and share their resources with up-and-comers who are going to be the future of the industry. So super important, which leads me to a question for Sylvia. If you could speak a little bit more in detail about how Ralph Lauren, which we obviously know is an international super brand, how do you help them integrate sustainability into its operations?
Yes, so Ralph Lauren, being like a huge, massive corporation, has also like a huge, massive production. So they did actually set very ambitious sustainability goal recently. And one thing like I want to mention, it's also that like the shift that is happening across the industry is also a response to like how much awareness that the consumer level is starting to grow. There are like a lot of customers, like myself included, they evolved into like, okay, I want to buy only one product and I want it to be ethically sourced rather than buying 10. And this is because I started to see, press and reports about like how much is the impact on the environment and also social impact of fast fashion in particular, but fashion in general. So one thing that has been, raising awareness to the consumer is also like in strict relationship to how the companies are operating. So our corporation is recognizing this shift, and they have been actually setting like very ambitious goals. So the key one is that like they target to reduce the absolute scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. And we're actually this year, we're actually at 29%. And then we are targeting to achieve net zero by 2040. And so the company has actually invested and has been recruiting an outstanding sustainability team that is growing, and it's actually it's in a very impressive way. They have been leading a big transformation across the company. And so I work on the product side, so meaning like I side with design to make the product happen. So it has been a mass like collective effort to reach these goals. So on our side, for example, like one of the key goals is to switch to 100% sustainable key raw materials. So meaning that our polyester is recycled, our cotton is coming from sustainable sources, so is wool and so on, like viscose and cashmere and all the other material. And so this meant that like when I saw the goal actually a few years ago, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be crazy. But like it was really a mass effort of everyone in the team to like switch and redevelop and source. And we got to a very good place. I think like we are already getting to meet those goals by 2025. And honestly, it has been very impressive. Also, our like restaurant has always been actually very careful and very like since I joined the company, I saw, but I think even before, about their factories and their sourcing and the supply chain. So they always had very like, strict requirements and criteria for their supply chain and all our vendors. And then also now as a sustainability goal, our company is basically targeting to have 80% of our business to be suppliers that meet key criteria in social environmental performance. So we are also on target to meet that. So yeah, it's a lot because there are a lot of components that make make fashion happen. But as as a big corporation, there is like also so much impact that we are doing in a way.
Absolutely. And I can imagine with a supply chain that spans the globe, that is no easy feat, but 29% a few years early is very impressive indeed.
Yeah.
And I think it's also setting a higher benchmark for vendors and companies who want to work with you. If they need to meet
Exactly.
certain criteria, then it's just sending a really strong message that everyone needs to shape up if you want to be working with the leading brands.
Yeah, exactly. We have been like selecting the different vendors and we have been letting go of other ones that they were not meeting those criteria. So it's, it's a change.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. So Dory, here's a question for you. As the publisher of Green Living magazine, how do you leverage the media? We've talked a lot about what goes on behind the scenes, and the supply chain, the manufacturing, the design. But in something consumer facing like media, how do you leverage that to shape the public perception and promote all these sustainable practices within the fashion industry?
Definitely by educating and inspiring and engaging your readers to share personal stories. We took a year and we highlighted a model who basically was an upper end model, and then she learned about sustainable fashion and she told stories and making sustainable fashion like front and center that everybody would want to be involved in. And I really think also it's, as Sylvia highlighted, looking at brands that are, who are their vendors, who are they sourcing, who are they partnering with, and what other brands can you collaborate with as well. And sharing your own story. For example, myself, I haven't done a personal interest story, but I haven't bought new clothes in years. I go to a clothing swap every year, and I get a lot of my clothes for that next year. And if I am going to buy a sustainable brand, it's going to be from Eco Fashion Corp or possibly from Fashion Kind or Ralph Lauren, a company that I know has the same values that I have. And so really sharing those type of stories and getting communities involved. We, as the magazine, we've done a clothing swap before. And we also are partnering with ASU, and we're going to be doing a fashion event with them in the fall and getting the students engaged as well. So I really think it's about connecting with community, connecting with brands. We've also featured Marcy and Alicia on our cover, which has been wonderful as well. So engaging more people. I think Alicia has something she wants to say.
Alicia, hi.
Sure. I just wanted to say, like, one of the themes that is integral to what everybody has talked about is storytelling, right? As Dory just said, as Nina talked about, as Marcy talked about, I think we've really shifted, and it's back to that psychology. And I, as a storyteller, deeply appreciate this, that we don't just want the thing. It's what is the story about the thing? For me, like just starting with what Dory was talking about, like I love thrifting. I love thrifting with my daughter. I love thrifting in foreign countries. Because then you have this thing that reminds you of that trip. You know, I love swaps with my friends. Like swap parties are so much fun. I do it at least once a year with like different friend groups, and you bring your stuff and you get new stuff, and nobody's purchased anything. It's back to like what's already existing. With Nina and Fashion Kind, like knowing the artisans who made the thing and having that story to be able to tell, to be able to talk about that. And that's like right there on her website. And same with Marcy, like you can really trace the entire circular nature with everything that eco fashion makes. And, you know, one of the things I was talking earlier about, what do we like, certain things you have to buy. One of them is underwear, right? Like underwear is just one of those things you don't want to wear somebody else's underwear. And Marcy and I have been talking about doing an underwear line. I've been trying to push her, like I've been like, let's do this for ages, because I think there is like a missing market around really beautiful, sustainable underwear. So I just want to point out to the audience and to everybody listening, like there's something really beautiful in how we're shifting as culture from consumer and like consume to story, and like really pausing, thinking, do I need this? What am I looking for in that feeling? And if I like, oh, I get to tell a story with that. And it's about, again, what you were saying, Marcy, about community. How do we create community as opposed to comparison, or like, I want you to feel this way about this thing I'm wearing, as opposed to let's together tell stories and create together.
Oh, absolutely. You know, a piece is so much more interesting when it has a story, first of all. You know, it's not just a thing. There's a life behind it.
And I guess I also want to say, like Ralph Lauren, I have Ralph Lauren clothes that are over 20 years old, and they're high quality, so they last, and I take extraordinary care of them. And when I challenge you, Sylvia, because I think you guys have such an extraordinary brand. What I'm really curious about is like, have you guys played with asking people to bring in their things and remaking things? Like there is so much existing amazing Ralph Lauren clothes on the planet, some of which are not being worn. Have you guys ever played with the idea of, the way that H&M does, of saying, bring in your clothes? Like, have you guys ever thought about doing something like that, where you can bring in your gorgeous, Ralph Lauren denim, and you guys would remake with it and reuse it?
Yeah, so first thing, I'm loving what everyone is sharing, and there is much that I would like to add. So one like base thing is that is an advantage for Ralph Lauren in terms of like being sustainable. It's actually the brand identity is very rooted in its own heritage rather than fashion trends. And I think as a person, I'm also like, I used to be like, I want to be trendy, like in my 20s, and like I evolved into like feeling empowered to decide what I want and buy, because there is, as you say, there is a story behind that, or like something unique that I found in a thrift store that nobody else has, rather than, buying because some advertise is telling me that I need to buy that thing. So that is one advantage of Ralph Lauren, together with quality, high quality standards, like makes a garment actually not go out of fashion, and like you can use it, for many years. And also, I'm aware that the company also like is implementing some some initiative in actually both recollecting Ralph Lauren garment and like kind of restyle and resell vintage garment across stores and online, and as well like they're starting to collect materials such as cashmere to be recycled. And also I think they also have one of their goals was actually to also offer repair and like repurpose of garments. And this is like probably gonna be started in the major cities and more as like capsule experiments. So like it's not on a large scale as far as I know so far, but you know, it is very interesting. And again, like it's also a way to kind of bring awareness to the customer. Hey, you can reuse this, like you can repurpose it or you can recycle.
Yeah, I love
think that,
I
Oh,
just
no.
love all the resale programs that brands are implementing these days. I think it's a really great opportunity for circularity. Go ahead.
No, and I think, you know, another theme that is emerging, and some of it goes back to the psychology, is this idea of quality, right, over quantity. If you buy something and invest in something that is high quality, like Alicia, you did, you know, with those Ralph Lauren pieces decades ago, you're going to be more inclined to repair it if it rips, to wear it multiple ways, to keep it in your closet. Similarly to, you know, if you swapped with your friends or went and got this piece at a thrift store from this trip, if the clothes are more than just a transaction, you know, and they're quality garments, your psychology then changes around how you think about the clothes in your closet, how you treat them. I think there is a shift from a psychological perspective that happens between your 20s and 30s. When you go into getting your first paycheck, you really want to make those dollars stretch. And so you kind of get sucked into the fast fashion marketing of, you know, many more for much less. Often that ends up being quantity over quality. So unfortunately, maybe those pieces won't end up staying in your closet for a long time. You have to then replace them. So sure, maybe at first point of purchase, they may be cheaper. But if you think about how much you have to replace them, I think there's actually a statistic about the average debt that a fast fashion consumer goes into. Unbeknownst to them, they don't think that they think they're saving money in the long run. But then as you get into your 30s, and I'm talking particularly for women, I believe the research is on, that shift from quantity to quality kind of flips, and you become more focused on the quality of the piece, on how long it will last, on investing in something that, especially if you find something that you love that's well made, it can be hard to find things you love and that are flattering on you and that make you feel amazing on, you know, I think we hopefully have all felt that feeling where you put something on and you're just like, yes, this is it. I just am set for the rest of the day. One less thing I have to worry about. And so if it's well made, like you want to keep that feeling. And so really focusing on quality and going beyond just this point of transaction with storytelling, with connection, also starts to change the psychology, right, of then how you treat your clothing after point of purchase, which I think we so often don't think about. Actually, it's so interesting you asked about Ralph Lauren's program. My best friend's late father had this jacket he wore nonstop all over the world. He was a photographer. It was Ralph Lauren. And he would just take it back every time it ripped and they would fix it and they would patch it and they would, you know, and so then this jacket kind of took on a life of its own. And actually the other week, a couple of weeks ago, Ralph Lauren hosted an event with the Circularity Project, which is a new nonprofit started focus on circularity in the industry. And what was really fascinating is it wasn't just your typical sustainability folks in the room, which I'm sure we're all very used to. It was also, you know, the head of design at all of these major fashion houses who were interested in, oh, wait a second. Okay, Coach did this whole program of taking existing pieces and reinventing them. You know, how can we do that? How did you do that, Stuart? You know, like, and it was just a very reinvigorating space to be in, to say, okay, if someone else has done it, we don't have to compete. Why don't we learn from each other, right? We can do it too with our pieces. So I just think that it's an exciting time we're in because, and Marcy, I know can relate to this. It's like beating your head against the wall for a very long time when no one else was talking about it. And you started even before I did. And now we're in this place where, people are excited about it, from the consumers up, from the small guys up. And so it's exciting. And I think a great opportunity for budding designers. What an awesome environment to be starting in. I think people, as I mentioned, are much more open to knowledge sharing. So for designers, I wouldn't even be afraid to reach out on Instagram to designers you admire or to people you admire. And worst that can happen is you don't hear back or they say no. But at least you can reach out and look for knowledge sharing opportunities, because it's a much more open industry in a lot of ways than it was. Of course, in a lot of ways, it's still not. But it's an exciting time for sure. And I think that transition of quality, storytelling, breathing new life into existing pieces is really exciting, and actually just a great resource for if there are any young designers on listening in. Queen of Raw is a wonderful platform that connects you to dead stock materials, existing material that has been created but isn't being used. And so that idea of kind of breathing new life into existing material instead of always creating new material is a very exciting one, particularly for newer designers, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. She's great. And I think it's important too, if you're a young designer coming up, to think about how can I build these qualities into what I'm creating, even if I'm creating something new. How can I build something that lasts? And Dory, did you want to say something as well?
I wanted to say, I think the 3 R's are somewhat overused, but I feel that everyone's really focused on recycling. But if you really look at reducing with the overconsumption, and you look at reusing and then also repurposing. So for example, my mom had a ton of jewelry and I have all this jewelry now, and I'm like, what am I going to do with it? And my office is in a jewelry store, so I'm going to be like melting it down and repurposing it into new pieces. But then I still have my mom's jewelry with me. So I really think I think we all have recycling, but really looking at reduce, reuse, and repurpose.
Yeah,
So much. And I will just piggyback off of that, because one of my friends started a store called Shop Repurpose, which you can online, it's shoprepurpose.org. And it is, all sort of secondhand clothes. But one thing that when we did our fashion line, and an idea that we had that we never moved forward with because I'm an actress, not a designer, was at Shop Repurpose, they have sewers come in so that they can do exactly what you're talking about, Dory, of let's say there's a piece and you're like, oh, this isn't quite right, this doesn't fit. Well, how do we repurpose these 2 pieces and make them one that fits you, or take these 2 different pieces and put them together and create a new piece, which is just so freaking cool to me.
That's super exciting. And it's a skill. I mean, it's a way to pull in all these craftsmen who've been doing things for generations, and you're giving them a new challenge. That's so exciting if you're a craftsperson or a designer or, someone who knows jewelry, to, be given these precious stones and this precious metal and be like, what else can I create out of these materials that, by the way, will last forever? Sylvia.
Yes, one thing that I felt I wanted to add is also I'm very conscious that Ralph Lauren, in terms of affordability, right? So I'm very conscious that Ralph Lauren is a kind of product that only a small part of the population can afford, and sustainability and quality comes at a cost. So we also need to keep in mind and try to find solution also to like reach and like make it available for everyone. And I mean, this is like part of a larger conversation, but I feel, you know, like we also need to address inequality because that's the other bigger elephant in the room that like is like very entangled with fighting climate change. But yeah, I think like finding solutions that are actually cost friendly and accessible, like it's very, very important.
For sure. And like you said, I think that is part of a whole different conversation. And maybe when Jill decides to bring this into 2.0 next year, that can be a great topic for us to all cover. There is something else that the ASU team has built into this event, and that is a little poll to be interactive with you guys in the audience. We are going to launch a quick poll that is going to help us identify which aspects of this discussion you know, that the audience finds most challenging and that we can also dive into in the remaining minutes of the panel. So you guys should all see this on your screen. Unfortunately, we on the panel can't vote, but there are 4 topics there, and it would be great if you guys could all take a second to just click on the one that you feel is the biggest challenge to sustainable fashion. So we'll give you all a minute. I mean, they all seem equally important. It's hard to click on just one. We got some answers. Oh, okay. Look, the first 2 were actually neck and neck, but it seems that 55% of the audience who voted cited lack of awareness, which I find interesting. And again, highlights what we're talking about, you know, Alicia's having a platform, you know, as an actress to share, Dory having a magazine in which we can kind of really help awareness, you know, Marcy and Nina, you know, being on speaking panels and being on magazine covers, and Sylvia, all the work that you do behind the scenes. So that is very interesting. And then the second was cost, which of course Sylvia just touched on as well. So hopefully in the remaining minutes we can get into that. And interestingly, no one said design limitations. So I guess for all of us in the fashion world, that's a good thing. No one feels limited by that. So that is very valuable.
Actually, there has been a lot of evolution in terms of technology with what we can do with sustainable material, and has been going very fast. So there used to be more limitations, I think, years ago, and now like we're like actually catching up.
Very exciting time to be a designer, right? And to work in product. Okay, so Marcy Z, I promised we would get back to this. I want to deepen everyone's understanding of the intersection between sustainable agriculture and fashion. Now, regenerative farming is something that you all may have heard about and kind of maybe wonder, well, what is that? And it doesn't have to do with food. What does food have to do with fashion? Well, Marcy Z, who happens to also be the chair of the Textile Exchange and an ambassador for the Rodale Institute. Marcy Z, I'm going to ask you to explain to us how regenerative agriculture practices are really integral to the evolution of sustainable fashion.
Sure. Well, I'm a self-proclaimed soil junkie, so this has definitely been
Okay.
a big part of my life for 3 decades. And I just got back yesterday from Spain, where I was with the Textile Exchange Board. As chair of the board, we get together in person once a year, and kind of building off what Alicia said about the community. It's about unity in the community, and when we talk about regenerative agriculture, and we look at the fact that in a more than $2 billion global industry, a third of the textiles out there today are made of cotton, right? Or, or some natural fibers, but really predominantly cotton is, the biggest of the natural fiber group. And what most people don't realize is cotton is the dirtiest crop in agriculture, right? And so, there's this misconception that we're spraying our food and then we eat it and it's toxic. And that's why the organic food movement and now the regenerative food movement in some ways has started to grow and gain momentum. But you can't really support one part of the equation without the other because they grow hand in hand. And so when you talk about soil degradation and the health of the soil, it has really gotten to a place where it no longer serves the purpose it's meant to serve. So soil is the skin of the earth, right? Just like our skin absorbs, soil is meant to absorb carbon out of the atmosphere. And so when you talk about soil that's been depleted of all of its, biodiversity, all of its nutrients, you can compare that to the human body. And when you don't take care of your own immune system, you become weaker and more vulnerable to bugs, right? Well, the same thing happens with the soil. The bugs start to, infest on plants that are growing in weak or deteriorated soil, which means more chemical use. And that system has proliferated. We call it the pesticide treadmill. There have been, suicide epidemics by farmers who get stuck on the system. They're spending a ton of money and the whole system is broken because at the end of the day, when you destroy soil health and you destroy the plants, ultimately you create, weaker fiber, and in the case of food, compromised health, right? So regenerative agriculture is all about using specific methodologies such as crop rotation instead of monocropping, right? Where you're building the nutrients in the soil by rotating crops together, all feeding the soil, just like eating a balanced meal. Or low tillage, where you're not breaking up the topsoil, right? Where the ecosystem and the living, breathing system is thriving, which is how carbon gets sequestered. So when we talk about at the Textile Exchange, our collective goal, we now have almost 1,000 members. It's to reduce our carbon footprint in the fashion and textile industry by at least 45% by 2030. And it's all hands on deck, but we can no longer look at cotton as business as usual. We have to, and I mentioned earlier, it's not about doing less harm. It's about doing more good and leveraging the power of fashion and textiles and the cotton industry to transform or expand regenerative and ultimately organic agriculture. Because, as Albert Einstein once said, we can't solve today's problems with the same consciousness that created them, right? Our clothing isn't growing, in the department store. The earth and people's lives are being affected every day by the choices that we're making. And what most people don't realize is 70% of the social and environmental impacts in the fashion industry actually happen at the fiber and material level. So if we really want to make a difference and reduce our impacts and actually, do good, we have to be looking through the lens of climate action, building soil health, And as Kiss the Ground said, and if you haven't seen the film or read the book, I encourage everybody to do so, understand that connectivity from agriculture to popular culture, or we all talk about story, source to story. And just as it relates to the questionnaire that we just did, creating that awareness, but not doing it through this like blind marketing campaigns, which is way the industry started back in the day. Today, most initiatives are being driven by product design and development teams, because you have to have that, integrity and that real substance, because there's policy coming in the next 2 years, and transparency, science-based climate targets are going to be held to account. Companies are scrambling now to try to figure out how to meet, their science-based climate targets. And, they haven't thought about, or now they're learning about the fact that, unlocking the potential to scale and start at the seed, building up to the self, is a really powerful way that we can, address climate action, because we can single-handedly globally, if we transform all soil to regenerative, solve for climate change. It's that powerful, right? And, at a cost level, just I'll end with, because I know that was also a topic. When you start at the beginning, and, my happy place is working with farmers where, we talk about the seed and representing life and bringing that up the supply chain. But when you're doing that, you can be more efficient in the supply chain, cutting out a lot of markups and middlemen. So you can unlock also efficiencies through vertical integration that can allow you to add value without adding cost. To solve for that, it has to cost a lot more. And who's going to make more when you do it this way are the farmers and the workers, those who deserve it. And through, our brands, Farm to Home and Yes and Seed to Style, and all of our B2B partnerships, we started, from the ground up and build up. And with Earth Day coming next week and Fashion Revolution Day, and that intersection, there's no more important time than now for people to start to understand their relationship with every choice that they make, and to be a part of something, bigger than we all are.
Sure. I mean, our fashion does come from the earth. So, and we all know with Earth Day, it's not just, it's one of our natural resources, right? So it's all connected, and it's all circular, which is really the theme of our talk. And as you were talking, Marcy, I saw Sylvia nodding. I'm sure you deal with a lot of this in terms of sourcing your cotton, and trying to get everything to a better place, which is all any of us can do. We've just got a few minutes left, and I wanted to make sure to thank each and every one of you ladies, also the 200 or so of you who joined us today. Thank you so much for all of these really great insights and some really actionable solutions. We have got a lot of people to thank today, and I'm so glad we could come together in this discussion. But firstly, I would love to express our gratitude to ASU FIDM and the Humanities Lab for sponsoring today's webinar and making this possible for us to share. And a special acknowledgement also to Professors Enrico Minardi and Jessica Kosak, whose guidance in the concept and development of this event has been so invaluable. So thank you. We also owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Oscar de las Salas from Gensler, who has not only mentored Jill and Vidit of ASU, but has been a really fierce advocate for this event. So thank you, Oscar. And of course, to our event organizers, Jill Stein and Vidit Sharma, whose dedication and organization were really crucial in bringing this event to life, as well as the ASU tech team, our silent heroes behind the scenes, who are keeping us all on the screen here. So as we close today's session, I just want to encourage each of you to consider what actions you can take in your own life, in your community, in your personal choices to promote sustainable practices, whether it's supporting some of the eco-friendly brands we've talked about, advocating for transparency in supply chains, or just simply educating others, sharing the story about what we talked about here today. Every action counts. And so we invite you all to stay connected with us for future webinars. There will be more. There will be more events like this. We will be having a 2.0, hopefully, with all of us who are here today. So check your emails for follow-up about that. And also wanted to remind everyone that a recording of this will be available to share, to recap, and just to really get it out there onto our socials, and to share our thoughts and to continue to engage in this discussion. So I hope everyone has a great day, and just remember that every step counts towards sustainability. Thank you.